The wind pushed against the wooden walls of the small-town diner, carrying the dry dust of the fading evening with it. Lamps glowed soft and low, stretching long shadows across the floorboards. And the place held that quiet hush that comes when a long day finally settles. A lone man sat at a corner table, hat tilted low, shoulders tired from years of ranch work and too many nights spent alone. He looked like someone who had carried more weight than his frame should bear, a widowed father who rarely spoke unless he had to. All he wanted tonight was a warm meal and a moment of peace after a week that had worn him down to the bone. He lifted his fork, ready to take the first bite, when the soft creak of the door broke the stillness. He didn't look up right away. He was used to sounds like that. Folks came and went. Travelers stopped in for coffee or a plate of stew. Usually nobody bothered him, and he preferred it that way. But then he heard a small voice, quiet but steady. The kind of voice that didn't belong in the hard silence of a western night, sir. We're hungry. His hand froze halfway to his mouth. Something in the tone made him look up. Standing by his table was a woman with a worn dress that once held color but now looked washed by sun and trouble. Beside her stood a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, with large eyes and a face that held both innocence and worry. The child clung to her mother's hand as if afraid the room might swallow her whole. The man blinked, taken off guard. He had never been the kind folks approached for help. He kept to himself, kept his grief packed tight and buried deep where nobody could reach it. Yet here they were, standing in front of him like they had nowhere else to go. The mother's voice trembled. "I'm sorry to trouble you. We saw you sitting alone and thought maybe you wouldn't mind. We haven't eaten since morning." Her words seemed to hang in the dim light. Stirring something inside him, he thought had long dried up. He wasn't a cruel man, but life had pushed him into habits of quiet distance. Since losing his wife, he had built walls around himself without even meaning to, walls that kept conversations short and expressions guarded. But the sight of them tugged at something old and familiar, something he thought he had lost alongside his past happiness. He tried to speak, but found no words at first. The mother lowered her eyes, maybe embarrassed, maybe expecting him to turn them away, like others might have. The little girl shifted her feet softly, dust rising from the floor beneath her worn shoes. He cleared his throat. "You've got no family around here?" She shook her head. "No, sir, just passing through. We hoped to find work on a farm east of town, but things didn't go as planned." He studied her for a long moment. She seemed honest enough, though he knew honesty wasn't always easy to trust in a land where folks did whatever they had to for survival. But this didn't feel like a trick or a scheme. It felt like a mother trying to keep her child alive for one more night. He gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit." They seemed surprised, grateful. The woman pulled the little girl closer and settled into the seat opposite him. The lamplight cast a warm glow over them, revealing the dirt on their sleeves and the tired lines around the mother's eyes. The girl rested her chin on the table's edge, staring at his plate like it held more hope than anything she had seen today. He signaled the kitchen for 2 more servings without saying much. The cook nodded and disappeared behind the curtain, pans clattering in the distance. The man returned his gaze to the pair in front of him, unsure how to break the silence. "Hard times out there," he said finally. The mother nodded gently. Harder than most want to admit, the way she said it made him think of his own struggles. Long winters spent worrying over cattle, nights when sickness struck his home and he felt powerless. Mornings when he woke alone to an empty house that echoed too loudly. He understood hardship more than he wished to. The food arrived soon, and the mother thanked him quietly. The girl waited for her mother's nod before taking her first bite. And when she did, she ate like someone who hadn't tasted real food in days. Watching her stirred something warm and uncomfortable in him, reminding him of the days when his own boy used to sit across the table, legs too short to touch the floor, shoes swinging back and forth as he ate. He forced himself to look away. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Far as we can manage," the mother replied. "Somewhere with steady work and decent folks." He hesitated before asking the next question. "Your husband around?" She tensed, but didn't look away. "No, not for a long time now." There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness. Only tired truth. The The kind he recognized well? He nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. The diner grew quieter as the evening deepened. A couple of ranch hands left, boots thudding on the porch as they pushed out into the night. A lantern flickered near the counter, the flame dancing in the draft. Outside, a wagon rolled past, its wheels crunching gravel in a slow rhythm as the room emptied. The mother and her daughter seemed smaller somehow, almost fragile in the dim light. Yet there was something strong about the way the woman carried herself, a determined steadiness that kept her going, even with nothing left but hope. The man watched them eat, trying to ignore the way their presence chipped at the silence he had protected for so long. He didn't know why he had let them sit with him. Maybe it was the little girl's voice. Maybe it was the mother's quiet courage. Maybe it was the way loneliness recognized loneliness. They finished their meals slowly, savoring every bite. The mother folded her hands on the table afterward, unsure if she should stay or rise. The girl leaned lightly against her arm, eyes half shut from exhaustion. "Sir," the mother said softly, "we'll be on our way. You've done more than enough." "Thank you." He didn't answer right away. Something in her tone made the air around them feel heavier, like there was more she wanted to say but didn't dare. She stood, guiding her daughter gently to her feet. As they turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. The girl shivered. The night outside looked colder than before, the kind of cold that settled deep into your bones if you weren't careful. He noticed the mother hesitate at the door, her hand tightening around her daughter's. He stared at them, feeling that old tug again, the one he tried so hard to ignore. "Hold on," he said. The mother looked back, unsure if she had misunderstood. He stood slowly, pushing his chair back across the wooden floor. He wasn't sure what he was going to say next. He wasn't even sure why he had spoken at all. But something about the moment felt like the split between one path and another, like the kind of choice that changes more than just a single night. The mother waited, eyes searching his face, the girl clutching her side, and before he could speak another word, the diner door behind them swung open sharply, followed by a voice that cut through the silence with a warning he did not expect. That voice changed everything. The man stiffened at the sound of the voice behind him, the kind that carried trouble without needing to shout. Slow footsteps crossed the wooden floor, the kind of steps that told everyone in the room to stay still and listen. The mother tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, and the little girl pressed herself closer, eyes wide and uncertain. The widowed father turned just enough to see the shadow of a tall figure near the entrance. The lamplight catching only the edge of a rough coat and a dusty hat. "Thought I'd find you here." The man didn't recognize the voice, but the tone carried a familiarity that didn't sit right. The stranger's boots scraped against the floor as he stepped closer. His words were pointed at the mother, though she didn't lift her eyes. She simply held steady, shoulders tense and jaw tight, as if bracing for something she hoped wouldn't come. The widowed father sensed the shift, the way danger pulled its chair up to the table without being invited. He kept his voice low. "You know him?" The mother swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's someone we've been trying to stay ahead of." That small sentence told him more than any long explanation. Folks didn't run from just anyone. They ran from trouble, from danger, from things they couldn't fight on their own. And the look on her face now confirmed it. Whatever past she carried, it had followed her all the way into this quiet diner on a cold western night. The stranger finally stepped into the light, revealing a sharp face weathered by hard living. His coat was travel-worn, his eyes narrow and searching as they landed on the mother and child. He gave a thin smile that held no warmth. "You left in a hurry the other day. Didn't even bother to say goodbye." The mother didn't move. The little girl hid behind her arm, peeking cautiously. "We're not going back," the mother said softly, but firmly. The stranger's smile tightened. "That's not how this works." The widowed father felt the old heat in his chest, the same protective instinct that used to rise when danger came near his boy. He didn't want trouble, and he avoided stepping into other people's messes whenever he could. But some things a man couldn't ignore, and a frightened woman with a child was one of them. Still, he held himself steady and didn't speak yet. Not until he understood more. "What do you want from them?" he asked. The stranger's gaze snapped toward him. He looked the father over, taking measure, trying to decide if he was a threat or just another tired soul trying to finish his supper. After a moment, the stranger shrugged. Nothing much. Just what belongs to me. The woman and the girl owe me more than you understand. The mother shook her head. We owe you nothing. We paid more than enough already. The stranger's lips curled downward. That ain't for you to decide. The widowed father studied the man's stance. He wasn't drunk, though he had the sharp edge of someone who'd been chewing bitterness for a long time. His hand hovered near his belt, too close to the shape of a gun holster, though no weapon showed yet. The father kept his own hands calm and open. He didn't want the little girl seeing fear. Fear had a way of taking root in children deeper than grown-ups ever realized. You're causing a scene, the father said in a firm tone. A couple of townsfolk near the back glanced up but quickly looked away, not wanting to be part of what was unfolding. Trouble like this spread fast in small towns, and most folks preferred to be gone before it took shape. The stranger chuckled. A scene, huh? I'm just here to take back what's mine. The mother flinched at the word mine, and the little girl buried her face in her mother's dress. The widowed father saw the tremble in the child's shoulders and felt something stir deep inside. He couldn't stand the sight of a child shaking in fear. Not after everything he'd lived through. Not after the nights he spent watching his own child sleep, promising he'd protect him from the world no matter what. We don't want trouble, the father said. Let them be. The stranger's eyes narrowed. And who are you to say so? The father didn't answer right away. He wasn't a lawman. He wasn't a sheriff or a ranch boss or someone with authority. He was just a man who had lost too much already, a man who wanted one quiet meal. And somehow fate had dropped something fragile in his path. A man who don't like bullies, he finally said. The room held its breath. The stranger opened his mouth to respond. But the cook pushed through the kitchen curtain at that moment, wiping his hands and looking around as if sensing the rising tension. When he saw the stranger, his expression darkened. You again? The cook muttered. Thought you'd ridden out of town already. The stranger ignored him. His eyes were locked on the mother, like she was the only thing he saw. You can run from me, he said slowly, but you can't hide. Not out here. Not anywhere. The widowed father saw the mother's hand tremble slightly where it rested on her daughter's back. He felt a deep pull of sympathy, mixed with rising anger toward the stranger who spoke like he had every right over their fate. We're done talking, the father said. Walk out that door? The stranger tilted his head, studying him with new interest. So that's how it's going to be. The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. His steady stance said enough. The stranger smirked again, but this time the smile didn't reach his eyes. He stepped back a few inches, then looked at the mother and child one last time. This ain't finished. With that, he turned and pushed open the diner door, the cold wind rushing in behind him. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the nearly empty diner long after he disappeared into the night. The mother let out a shaky breath she had been holding. The little girl clung to her side, eyes still wet with fear. The father waited until the tension eased just enough for the air to feel safe again. He leaned slightly toward them, speaking low. You need to tell me what he wants. The mother seemed hesitant, torn between staying guarded or trusting the man who had stood up for them without knowing their past. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a mixture of shame, exhaustion, and worry. We worked for him, she said, but he wasn't paying us right. When I asked about it, he got angry. Things turned bad fast. We left at dawn and kept moving. We thought we'd be far enough by now. The father frowned. Men like that didn't let go easy. He'd seen the type before. Folks who believed the world owed them control over everything in their reach. He sat back down, but didn't tell them to sit. He waited, giving the mother a moment to gather herself. The girl lifted her head timidly, her wide eyes watching him, almost as if trying to figure out if they were safe now, or if the danger was just waiting outside. You can't go back out there tonight, he said. He'll be waiting. Men like him don't leave things alone. The mother swallowed hard. Then what do we do? The father didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure himself. Bringing strangers into his life was the last thing he had planned. His ranch wasn't far, but it held memories he hadn't shared with anyone in years. He had kept that place closed off, just like his heart. And the idea of letting someone in again didn't sit easy, but leaving them out in the cold felt wrong in a way he couldn't ignore. A moment passed, thick with unspoken choices. Then the sound of a horse snorted outside. Hooves shifted in the dirt. A slow, heavy tread moved across the porch planks. The mother tensed again. The little girl grabbed her mother's sleeve. The father rose to his feet. Sharply through the window, the shadow of a tall rider shifted, blocking the lamplight. Someone else had arrived, and judging from the way the mother froze, this new arrival didn't bring comfort either. The father stepped forward, jaw tight, ready to face whoever stood on the other side of that door, and the moment the handle turned, he knew the night was far from over. The door pushed inward with a long, slow creak, and the widowed father instinctively stepped closer to the mother and her little girl. The wind behind the newcomer carried dust and the smell of horses, along with the uneasy feeling that the night had turned into something none of them were ready for. A tall rider filled the doorway, shoulders broad beneath a heavy coat, hat tilted low enough to hide his eyes. His boots were dust-coated. The way he stood there made it clear he wasn't just passing through. He looked around the diner before stepping inside, closing the door behind him as if sealing off whatever lay outside. The lamps flickered, shadows bending across the floor. The cook behind the counter stiffened, not in recognition but in cautious awareness. As though sensing the weight of the moment, the rider's voice was firm when he finally spoke. "I saw a man leave here in a hurry. He was watching you folks through the window." The mother's breath caught. The widowed father tightened his stance, hands steady, though his pulse kicked hard in his chest. The rider's gaze settled on the mother, then shifted to the little girl. He nodded, toward them gently. He wasn't hiding it either, the rider added. "Followed your tracks from the ridge." "You know him," the father said. "Not by name," the rider answered, "but by the way he moves. A man who thinks someone out here owes him something." The mother lowered her eyes. "We were hoping he'd lost the trail." The rider studied her more closely. His voice softened. "He did." The father didn't like the tone. It wasn't threatening, but it carried an understanding that made him uneasy. The rider wasn't a friend of the stranger outside, but he wasn't exactly comfort either. "Not yet." "Who are you?" the father asked. The rider removed his hat, revealing tired eyes and the kind of expression worn by men who'd seen too much trouble of their own. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing folks cornered. I was headed north, but I figured you might need a warning." The mother nodded faintly, gratitude glimmering in her eyes. The little girl peeked from behind her dress, studying the rider with a mix of fear and curiosity. The father glanced toward the window. The porch outside was empty now, but the air still felt heavy, like the stranger's presence lingered in the shadows. "You said he followed their tracks." "How far back?" the father asked. "Since morning," the rider replied. "I spotted him near the old mill. He rode quick, like he didn't care who saw him." The mother's face paled. "He's not going to stop." The father felt a pull deep inside his chest, the same pull that had already led him into someone else's path tonight. He knew danger when he saw it, knew fear when it showed in a mother's voice, and he knew the kind of men who chased shadows they believed belonged to them. Still, he had to understand what he was stepping into. "What does he want with you?" he asked again, this time more firmly. The mother hesitated, her gaze flickering between him and the rider, and then toward the little girl. She seemed torn between keeping secrets and protecting her child. After a long moment, she took a slow breath. "We worked at his camp," she said. "It was supposed to be a simple job. Laundry, cooking, small tasks. But when he refused to pay us, I confronted him. He said we were indebted to him for staying under his roof, that leaving wasn't an option. When he raised his hand at me, we ran." The father felt his jaw tighten. He had seen men who used fear as their only power, men who thought other people were possessions. The West had too many of them. The rider exhaled slowly. That kind of man doesn't forget when someone slips away. The little girl tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. "Are we in trouble again?" Her voice cracked slightly, and the father felt something twist inside him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so the child wouldn't feel the rising tension. "You're not in trouble," he said softly. "Not while you're here." The girl looked at him, eyes wide, seeking truth. He nodded once, steady and sure, and she seemed to draw a little comfort from it. But deep down he knew the danger wasn't gone. It had only stepped outside for air. The rider pulled out a chair and sat down near the door, still alert, as if expecting someone to burst in. He glanced at the father. "You planning to shelter them?" The father hesitated. He hadn't decided. His ranch was quiet, far enough from town, with land that stretched into the hills. He'd built a life there alone, shut off from the world since losing his wife. He'd promised himself he wouldn't let anyone in again. But watching this mother hold on to her little girl like she was the last piece of hope she had left stirred something he'd buried long ago. "If I have to," he said. The rider nodded. "Then you should know more." The father folded his arms. "Go on, that man outside isn't alone. He travels with 2 others. I saw their horses tied near the creek. They're waiting for a signal." The mother's breath hitched. The girl pressed her face into her side again. 3 of them, the father murmured. That explained the confidence in the stranger's tone earlier. Men rarely acted bold unless they knew they had numbers behind them. "Do they stay close?" the father asked. "Close enough," the rider said. "They move like they know this land. Maybe not locals, but good trackers." The cook stepped forward cautiously. "I don't want trouble in here." "Not the kind that ends with broken windows and bullet holes." The rider gave a small nod. "Won't start here if I can help it." The father glanced once more at the mother. Her shoulders were drawn tight, her breath shallow. She looked like someone who hadn't rested in days. Someone who'd been carrying fear for too long. He turned to her gently. "Do you have anything he wants besides you 2? Money, papers, belongings?" She shook her head. "Nothing worth chasing?" "Then why follow you this far?" the father asked. The mother hesitated. "Not for money. For control." That one word made the air colder. Control. The father had known men like that. Men who couldn't stand the idea of someone walking away from their grasp. The kind who believed fear could buy obedience. The kind who thought breaking a person was easier than letting them go. The rider tapped the table lightly. "We're wasting time talking. If he's close, he'll circle back soon." The mother clutched her daughter's hand tighter. The girl's eyes darted between the father and the rider, worry deepening. The father weighed everything in silence. His quiet life. His empty home. His memories that never softened. And the danger now pressing in from all sides. He didn't want to carry anyone else's burden. He didn't want to open the door to more pain. But as he looked at the mother, at her trembling hands and tired eyes, and then at the little girl, who hadn't let go of her mother's dress since the moment they walked in, something inside him shifted. Something old, but not entirely gone. He couldn't turn away. He let out a slow breath. "You can come with me for the night. My place is far enough off the road. They won't find it easy." The mother blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "You'd do that for us?" He didn't answer. His silence was enough. The rider stood. "I'll ride ahead and watch the ridge. If they follow, you'll know before they get close." The father nodded. The rider pushed through the door and disappeared into the darkness outside. The mother gathered her things. It's just a small cloth bag in her daughter's hand. The father picked up his coat, settling it over his shoulders, feeling the weight of the night shift once more. Before they stepped outside, the cook called after him. "You sure about this?" "No," the father said, "but I'm doing it anyway." They stepped onto the porch. The wind had calmed, but the stillness felt heavy. The horses tied nearby tossed their heads as the father helped the mother and child up onto his wagon. The road stretched ahead into the darkness, the sky dim with clouds. As he took the reins, he felt the mother settle behind him, the girl curled at her side. The wagon wheels creaked softly as they started forward, but just as they reached the edge of town, A flicker of movement caught his eye up on the ridge near the tree line. A silhouette, then another, watching, waiting. The father tightened his grip on the reins. The night had only begun to reveal its dangers. And somewhere out there, the man they were running from was preparing his next move. The wagon rolled slowly along the narrow dirt road, its wheels crunching over loose gravel and dry brush. The widowed father kept his eyes fixed ahead, though he could feel the weight of the darkness closing in around them. The lantern hanging from the wagon swayed with each bump, throwing shaky patterns of light across the bushes and tall grass. Behind him, the mother held her daughter close, keeping a hand on the girl's back, as if afraid she might disappear if she loosened her grip for even a second. The ridge where the silhouettes had stood was now behind them, but their presence lingered like a shadow that refused to be shaken off. Every rustle of the wind sounded like footsteps. Every creak of the wagon frame felt like a warning. "Are they following us?" the mother asked softly. "Not yet," the father replied. "But they will." The girl pressed her face into her mother's arm, her voice trembling. "Why won't they leave us alone?" "Because some men don't know how to let go," the father said, keeping his voice steady even though the tension sat heavy in his chest. The night stretched ahead in silence for a long while. The open land around them was darker than usual, clouds smothering the moon, leaving only faint outlines of the hills. The father guided the horse carefully, knowing the path but still cautious. His ranch wasn't far, but danger had a way of making familiar roads feel different. Like the land itself was holding its breath. Behind him, the mother shifted slightly. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this. You didn't have to help us." He didn't look back. "You were in trouble." "A man can't just ignore that," her voice softened. "Most would have." He didn't answer. He had lived long enough to know that kindness wasn't as common as it should be. But he also knew he couldn't walk away from someone in need, not after everything he had seen. Not after losing the only person who ever depended on him. The wagon reached a narrow bend, where the hills rose higher on both sides. The father slowed the horse and listened. A faint echo carried through the canyon, distant but real. The steady rhythm of hooves. More than one horse? The mother heard it too, and tightened her hold on her daughter. "They're coming. Stay down," the father said quietly. "Don't lift your heads." He flicked the reins gently, urging the horse forward. The wagon picked up speed, its wheels rattling harder against the uneven ground. The canyon walls funneled the sound of their pursuers, making it impossible to tell how close they were. But they were close enough. The father scanned the terrain. The hills offered no hiding places, the road too narrow to turn back. The only hope was to reach the small grove of trees near his ranch, where the path split. If he could get there, he'd have choices. Cover, shadows, places to slip away or plan. Just as they rounded another bend, the father caught sight of movement behind them, torchlight flickering at the far end of the canyon. 3 riders. Moving fast, he pressed his lips together. "Hold tight." The horse strained as the father urged it faster, the wagon jolting over rocks that made the girl gasp softly each time. The mother whispered soothing words to her, trying to keep the child calm, though fear trembled in her own voice. "They're closing in," the father murmured, glancing back just enough to see the torchlight narrowing the distance. The riders didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their silence made the chase feel colder, more deliberate. Men who hunted without sound were men who carried their intentions with dangerous certainty. The canyon widened suddenly, opening into the long stretch of field that led toward the father's land. The trees were still far, but at least the open space gave the horse room to run. He slapped the reins sharply. The horse surged forward, mane whipping in the wind, the wagon shaking hard enough that the father had to tighten his grip to keep steady. The mother braced herself, shielding her daughter with her own body as the chase thundered behind them. One rider shouted finally, a harsh yell cutting through the night. The sound sent a chill down the mother's spine. "Faster," the father urged. "Just a little more." The torches closed the gap fast. Their orange glow spilled across the grass, dancing wildly as the riders pressed harder. The father could now hear the snorts of their horses, hear the whip striking sides. Then one of the riders swung something overhead. A rope, a lasso. The father felt his stomach drop. Hold on. The rope flew through the air, missing the wagon by inches. It snapped against the ground with a thud. The girl whimpered, burying herself deeper into her mother's arms. Another rider tried again. The father swerved slightly, the wagon skidding on loose soil. The mother gasped. They won't stop. They won't. The father agreed. That's why we can't slow down. The trees ahead grew closer. Their dark shapes offered hope, but between the wagon and that safety, the riders pushed harder still. The father's arms shook from the strain of steering and holding control. Sweat dripped down his brow, despite the cold wind. Almost there, he whispered to himself. The horse was breathing heavily now, but still pushing. Still running, then a sudden crack rang out. Not a rope, not a shout, a gunshot. The sound split the night wide open. The mother screamed softly and shielded her daughter's head. The father glanced back. One of the riders had fired into the air, not at them. A warning, a demand to stop, a sign that they were growing impatient. The father clenched his jaw. He didn't stop. Another shot fired, this time closer. Dust sprayed near the wagon wheel, a warning that the next might not miss. The father whipped the reins again. The trees were only moments away now. If he could reach the cover, he could angle the wagon down toward the hidden path near the stream. The riders would either lose sight of them or be forced to split up. The horse lunged forward as if sensing the urgency, the wagon barreled into the first row of trees, branches scraping the sides, leaves scattering across the air. The darkness beneath the canopy swallowed them quickly. But the riders stayed close, their torches weaving between trunks like fiery ghosts. Turn left. The mother cried. No, the father said. They'll trap us. Hold on. He veered right sharply, the wagon tilting dangerously before steadying. The girl clung tighter to her mother, eyes shut tight. The father recognized the land now. He had played in these woods as a boy, hunted through them as a younger man, walked them after his wife passed just to keep his grief from drowning him. He knew every bend, every fallen log, every slope, and he knew the narrow ridge where the path dropped sharply into the creek bed. If he timed it right, the wagon could slide safely down. But a horse at full speed would hesitate. Riders pushing too fast might not see the drop in time. The riders kept yelling now, frustration rising. The torches flickered wildly as they dodged trees, trying not to lose their prey. The father guided the horse toward the ridge. The ground sloped downward. The wagon rocked. The mother held her daughter so tightly, the father could hear the child's soft breath shaking. Just a little more. The riders burst through the trees behind them, closing in, their torches glowing brighter as they narrowed the distance. One rider leaned forward, reaching for the mother from horseback. The father steered sharply toward the ridge. The wagon wheels hit the slope hard. The wagon tilted. The mother screamed. The girl cried. Out the horse struggled for footing. The riders shouted, and just as the wagon dropped into the narrow creek bed, barely holding together, the riders pulled up too late. One horse slid sideways, another stumbled. Torches fell, and the men above shouted in anger as the wagon vanished into the shadows below. Bought only seconds of escape, the father steadied the horse and kept moving through the creek bed, breathing hard. He didn't look back. They weren't safe yet. Not by far. The men would find another way down. They would circle. They would come again. He felt the danger closing in like a tightening rope. They're not giving up. The mother whispered, "Hey, Shell." "No," the father replied. "But neither am I." The creek bed led toward the ranch, toward the barn, toward whatever fight was coming, and the night was far from finished. The wagon rattled along the creek bed, its wheels splashing through shallow water as the widowed father urged the horse forward. His arms trembled from holding the reins so tightly, but he didn't loosen his grip.
Not yet.
The mother held her daughter close, whispering soft words that steadied the child even as fear lingered in her eyes. The trees thinned overhead, and the father caught the first glimpse of his ranch through the branches. The small cabin stood quiet beneath the night sky, a lantern hanging on the porch swaying gently in the wind. Seeing it brought a small rush of hope. Like a warm breath after a long, cold ride. "We're almost there," he said. Though his voice carried more caution than relief, the creek bed opened into a narrow path behind the barn. He guided the horse up the slope, careful not to tip the wagon. Once on flat ground, he pulled the reins and brought the wagon to a stop under the shelter of the barn's overhang. The mother gathered her daughter into her arms and climbed down, legs shaking from the rough ride. The girl clung to her mother and then looked toward the cabin, eyes wide with curiosity. "This is where you live?" she asked quietly. "It's home," the father said. "It's not big, but it'll keep us safe tonight." The mother stepped closer, her voice soft. "Thank you for bringing us." He nodded once, though worry still pressed heavy on his shoulders. The riders could be making their way around the ridge even now. They might reach the ranch in minutes or in an hour, but they would come. A man like the stranger didn't walk away from a chase after getting this close. "We need to get inside," the father said. "Hurry." He helped the mother and child into the cabin, closing the door behind them. The room was warm from the fire he had left burning earlier, the glow casting soft light across the wooden walls. A worn table sat in the middle, a few chairs gathered around it. A shelf held old dishes. A small bed stood in the corner his bed, but he didn't mention that yet. The mother looked around with tired eyes, as if grateful to see something steady after days of fear and running. "You to take the bed?" he said before she could ask. "I'll stay near the door," she hesitated. "We don't want to trouble you more than we have." "It's no trouble," he replied. "Not tonight." The girl climbed onto the bed and pulled the blanket over her legs. The mother sat at her side, brushing hair from the child's face. For a moment, peace filled the room, fragile but real. Then a faint sound broke the quiet hooves. Not close, but not far either. The father's expression hardened. He stepped to the window and peered through the cracks of the shutters. In the dim distance, he saw faint flashes of torches weaving between trees. The riders were coming fast. He turned back toward the mother. "You need to stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't come to the door unless I call." Fear flickered in her eyes, but she nodded. The little girl watched silently, sensing the tension, but trusting the calm in the father's voice. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The wind brushed cold across his face. The riders' torches glowed brighter now, approaching from the ridge that overlooked his land. He grabbed the lantern hanging by the door and lit it fully, letting its warm glow spread across the porch. The barn stood tall to his left, the open pasture stretching far beyond. The creek bed they had come through wound around the property like a dark ribbon. The riders came into view at the far side of the pasture. 3 of them. The stranger leading the way. His posture was rigid, his jaw set hard with determination. The other 2 men flanked him, each holding a torch that whipped in the wind. The father stepped off the porch and walked onto the open yard. He kept his hands visible, not reaching for his rifle yet. He wanted to give the riders one chance to turn back, one chance to choose peace. The stranger slowed his horse, stopping about 20 yards away. His voice cut across the space between them. "Thought you could run from me?" The father shook his head. "Nobody's running. They're under my roof now." "You need to leave," the stranger laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think you can stop me?" The father held his ground. "If you try to take them, you'll be crossing a line you won't come back from." The stranger leaned forward dangerously. "They belong to me." "No, they don't," the father said firmly. "You need to understand that." The stranger raised his hand. The riders tightened their grips on their torches. The father knew he had only seconds before the men charged. But then a new sound cut through the night hooves, fast, approaching from the opposite direction. The father spun around, his heart jumping. Another rider emerged from behind the grove of trees. It was the man who had warned them earlier, the tall rider with the tired eyes. He rode hard into the clearing, bringing his horse to a sudden stop between the father and the stranger's group. He pointed at the men. "You're done here." The stranger's face twisted with anger. "You again?" The rider didn't answer. He turned slightly toward the father. "I circled the ridge. Saw them cutting across your land. Figured you'd want company." The father nodded gratefully. The stranger looked between the two men. His confidence faltered for the first time. He realized he was outmatched, not by weapons, but by resolve. The father stood firm. The rider beside him was steady as stone, and the men behind the stranger shifted uneasily, as though their loyalty had limits. They hadn't come for a fight. They came to intimidate. And now, the intimidation was slipping from their grasp like sand through fingers. The father took a small step forward. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave now. Go back the way you came. Don't come near them again. The stranger's jaw trembled. He looked at the cabin, then at the mother's silhouette barely visible through the window. His anger warred with the truth settling in. He had lost. Not because he didn't want to keep control, but because he had run into something stronger than control. Something steadier. Finally, he spat into the dirt, yanked his reins, and wheeled his horse around. The other two riders followed, one of them glancing back nervously before disappearing into the dark. Their torches vanished among the trees until the night swallowed them completely. The father let out a long breath, the tension draining from his shoulders. The tall rider dismounted and walked to him. "They won't come back tonight," the rider said. The father nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," the rider replied. "Thank yourself for standing your ground." The father looked toward the cabin. The lantern glowed softly behind the window. The mother was holding the curtains slightly open, watching with hope and fear mingled. The little girl peeked out beside her. The rider placed a hand on his horse's neck. "I'll camp near the ridge. Keep watch until dawn. You don't have to," the father said. "I know," the rider replied. "But I will." He mounted again and rode off toward the trees, leaving the father alone in the quiet yard. The wind had softened. The danger had passed. The father walked slowly back to the cabin and opened the door. The mother rushed forward, her daughter at her side. "Is it over?" He nodded. "For good." The little girl threw her arms around him. "Thank you. Thank you for keeping us safe." He knelt down to her level, his voice gentle. "You're safe here. Both of you." The mother's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of relief. She touched his arm lightly. "We can never repay you." "You don't need to," he said. "Sometimes folks just need a place to rest. And maybe I did too." She smiled softly, understanding more than his words revealed. The night grew warmer. The fire crackled. The little girl curled up on the bed, asleep within minutes. The mother sat at the table, exhaustion melting from her shoulders. The father poured 2 cups of warm coffee, handing one to her. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt like a home again. He glanced around at the small space and realized something had shifted inside him. All the sorrow he had held on to finally loosened. The mother looked at him with quiet gratitude. "You saved us." He shook his head gently. "Maybe we saved each other." The wind settled outside, the land calm and quiet. The chase was over. The fear had passed. And in its place, something new began to take shape. Fragile, but hopeful. A new chapter neither of them had expected. A mother and her daughter finally safe. A father finding a reason to live again. And a home that no longer held just memories, but new beginnings. The night ended not with fear, but with peace. And at last, the widowed father felt something he hadn't in a long, long time. He felt whole again.